What's happening, guys? I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. Once again, Sunday night scan. We'll get prepared for Monday. Hopefully get some good ideas for tomorrow and the week ahead. But first and foremost, we've got the 6th annual charity conference and golf tournament coming. That is October 11th to the 13th. One thing just to make a note of, I've gotten messages before. I don't golf, so I don't think it's really for me. You do not need to be a golfer. That is Friday during the day, it's not part of the event. It's an opportunity to also golf during it, and typically we have 40 to 60 golfers or so. On that night, Friday night, we do a nice cocktail hour. The next day we have... Actually, I think it's 2 hours. But the next day we have a bunch of trader talks, a couple long-form speakers, as well as a lunch and a lot of time in between so that you can, talk amongst yourselves and really network with traders. So following that, you guys can do dinner, do your thing, and then we reconvene later on and we do another 2-hour cocktail party. And so that is the Saturday night. Sunday night, do not leave in the morning. Sunday, do not leave in the morning. We do go through and have a few more speakers Sunday morning. We have a couple trader talks. We have a couple breakout sessions, a little bit more one-on-one style or group type sessions where you can really dive in and get your questions answered and go back and forth. So that's the plan. If you guys have any questions, reach out. And anybody that's interested in sponsoring, you've got a lot of sponsorship opportunities. You can just click this button right here, and it highlights green. And basically, you can do different things. If you want to bring a group of 10 people, different things like that, there's different tickets included and whatnot. So check that out. If you have any questions, again, leave a comment in the comment section. We've got a video so you can kind of see and get a feel for what we do. And then last but not least, you can go through the 2019 speakers. We've got a lot of returning faces as well as quite a few new faces. Some people that I've never even met before, never even been familiar with just in the many years that I've been online. So I'm looking forward to meeting many of them, as well as Tom. He's been around for quite some time, and always a great pleasure to follow. Always has some great tidbits. A lot of people like the tweets that he puts out there because he keeps it real. And so I'm excited to meet him because he's one of the guys that I have not met for I don't know. It's probably been 10 years now or so, and we just haven't crossed paths. So I'm excited to finally meet Tom. But other than that, some familiar faces, some new faces. And it should be a really fantastic time. So I'm excited for that. Now, let's get back into the regular Sunday night scan, and let's see what we've got for tomorrow. So, first and foremost, I made a couple notes, up here on the top. Basically, this type of week was crazy. We had TWOU, we had Glue, and we had WLL, all just flushed out of the open. And typically for me to make a trade on something like that, I really want to have an edge, right? I really want to be able to have some type of push opportunity where I can see the trend actually fail and then look to get short from there. But unfortunately, if you kind of come back here, we were just going straight down, and then we open up, and it just flushes out yet again. So there was never really that edge for me to be able to short into a rip, to feel comfortable about it. Same thing with WLL, where it just kind of came apart, and it was floating down after hours. So that we knew was going to be a potential trade, but then it's heavy pre-market and flushes out of the open. Didn't really give any of those morning rips that typically I look for. And pretty much at open, it just literally went from 13.20s all the way down to 11, almost 20. So $2 per share. In hindsight, yeah, it would have been nice to just get short. But how many times have we seen this on MU and AMD and all these other names, JD, some of the Chinese type plays where you see this type of pullback, and then it opens up and it just rips. It rips up, 2 points in your face, and that's why you don't typically trade off the open. So unfortunately, missed some really, really nice opportunities. Same thing, glue. I was really prepared for this trade, and I was hoping that I would have some type of big rip. And I guess looking back, there was a little bit of a push, and I probably just had my focus elsewhere. But really nice opportunity gone to waste just because it just all happened in a candle or two. So you either had to be there or not. So that's been the frustrating part, I would say, about this week. There's been some incredible rain. I mean, we have not had momentum trades, right? We've had RHE, if I can type it right. We had RHE, which was a nice one. I got some early borrows on Friday morning. So I had a nice little push, and it went up to the 360s, almost into the 4s, but then started to come back. So I put out a video yesterday and kind of reminding you guys always to look left, right? So we look at it went up to about 380s or so. So you can kind of see that not once has it held over that level. Yes, it gapped up over this day and it had a huge rip, and that was also based on the type of market that we were in. There was a lot of emotion at that time. However, we went right back into that resistance. So these things do not happen by chance. So it's always good to look left. We talk about this every Sunday night. Get a feel for where it might run into resistance. And if you're trying to get aggressive, if you're adding, if you're buying into this breakout, just think about the fact that you're kind of playing with fire here, right? And, the times that it does break, as I said on the example, like VISL, you need to be cautious. That's an outlier type move, right? So, this day pre-market, it actually busted through and it held over that support, which the prior resistance became support, and it had one of those outlier days. More than 10 million shares volume in the first hour, etc. But with that said, RHE was nowhere even close to these prior volume candles, and many, many, many times it's failed at the 380s, and it should be no surprise that, weird, it got a little bit of inventory, it got a little pressure, it hit a wall at 380s. So that's not to say that you should be just scaling like crazy and always expecting and putting full faith in the fact that it's not going to break, because obviously the times that they go wild. But it's something to be aware of, and if it starts to suggest that your read was correct, that 380 level was an area of resistance, and it's failed to follow through. At that point, it starts to confirm your thesis over and over and over again, and in which case, you can see what happens. So, that was the only momentum trade that we've had. That's what you should be looking for, in my opinion. And other than that, all the other momentum or breakdowns has been on earnings play. We still have quite a few earnings plays this week, a lot of big ones actually, and so it's going to be an interesting week. So when I do scans right now, I'm trading less off of what is shown on scan the last probably week and a half. Usually I trade at least 2 or 3 names off scan, so I try to put a couple bigger picture type ideas on scan, as well as names that I just want to stay familiar with, because that takes half the work out later on when I start to see them setting up. I'm staying familiar with trades that I'm excited about, and so that's that. APHA, nice little earnings ripper on Friday. After hours, it had a pretty nice move. Got up to about this level over here, the 690s or so, started to pull back. It flushed out of the open. But once it got over that 690s, you can see that it started to hold that 690 as support, and then a nice slow squeeze from there. So what I would be looking for is a little bit of a pullback, potentially pullback 720 to 710 range. As long as it holds over 7, down to about 6, pretty much 7. Usually I like to look at the prior VWAP. As long as it doesn't break under that and stay heavy, I'm good for a potential weak open and rally. So What I want to look for is exactly that, risk based off of 7, and see if it continues to go. What I want to be cautious of is if it does gap up, I think it's going to have some trouble in the 750 to 770 range. And if it does, fail, a fail, and a fail, then I'm going to be looking for the backside type move. Same as RHE. Obviously, it's not a 1 million float, but that's the kind of chart that I'd be looking for it to kind of hit a wall. And if it does, then I would start to let the tape suggest that, yeah, you're right, it is fading, and join that trend. And so when I say, yep, you're right, what do I mean by that? I mean, when it should rally, it fails. It starts to go and it starts to set up, it's about to rally, and it fails. So anytime that it should do something and it doesn't, that's what I want to see. TWOU, I think that this could turn into like a home situation, right? Where we had that first initial pullback and everybody trying to balance it, and then we kind of pull back another buck or two. So I think that is a potential here. However, that idea, I throw it away if 1420 starts to base. And again, I went over that on the video this weekend. We've been talking about the 1420s and why they're so important. And not necessarily this pop and the two pops. You can see that for the most part, 1420s held. If you follow this dotted line across, you can see that. There are a few times that it breaks over it, but typically that's just kind of stopping out a couple folks and then pulls right back. So that'll be the plan there. ACOR. This was another one that was a big unwinder, just like glue and WLL and all those other ones that I went over, TWOU, to start this scan. So I did miss that opportunity. However, I did not take it off radar. I put on a little dabble, and my goal was to scale into this with a risk based off VWAP. So I had posted my chart on Friday, basically shorted into the push, and then wrote it down for about $1 per share. Not a trade I typically would take. However, based on the market, just like if we're in a low float market where low floaters are cracking left and right, going nuts, you're more, I guess you could be more aggressive or quicker to potentially buy something, where as in this market, you probably wouldn't push the button at all. You'd probably wait for something to set up a little bit more, or wait for it to get 5, 10, 15 million shares traded or something like that. Whereas, if you're looking at this ACOR, this is exactly what's been happening in the market. So normally I would not touch this, but based on what we've been seeing on WLL, based on what we've been seeing on TWOU, it was something that kind of fit the ticket right now, so I went ahead and traded it. NWL, this was a nice little, it kind of caught a couple people off guard, I think. Had a nice little gap up, flushed out. They ended up, I think they had a conference call. But at any rate, by the time it opened up at 9:30, it started to take off and didn't really pull back much since. There was one little VWAP test there. But what's going to be interesting is to see how it does react tomorrow based off of the chart. Once again, you can see it kind of ran right into this resistance. So right over here, this high, even these couple highs over here. So if we're going to start a new trend, then I'd be looking for dips to potentially join. However, if it gaps up and it kind of fails into this range, then I'd be looking to fade it again. So we'll see what happens with that one. SE has been a monster. I mean, it's been a steady monster for quite some time. But even, it was actually a big move on Thursday, and then it came back in with the market, and then it just, it just went straight back up. So I think shorts are bent over here. It's been a pretty amazing run, but I'm going to be watching it here. I could see this going, 40, 42 and then pull back. I could also see it failing at 38. Since you can see we've got a little bit of topping action. It's been failing a couple times so far, but it did close relatively well. So we'll see. If market pulls back, I'd be looking to fade this. SLDB, this one I've been swinging along with SMSI. The main reason on SLDB was because Perceptive was in there. They've been doing pretty well lately on a few of these names. There's been some pretty big moves. And so with that said, I'll follow and see if they if this thing starts to break out towards these prior resistance levels, which is in the high sixes, and in which case it could get into the gap and maybe fill it up to 850 or higher. So then same thing, SMSI. This one I had bought the dips over here. These 2 days I'm trying to let it work, see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong, but they had some pretty crazy earnings. This is not a day trade for me. So my goal was to get in, on the dips, 530 range. And then I'm looking forward to break out, consolidate, and ideally add to a winner throughout the trend. Glue, we'll see what happens. Pretty big volume, so we should have some type of opportunity. It did have a little bit of a rally, so what I'd be looking for is maybe a push back towards 5 and then maybe come back flat on the day. So basically it's kind of like LK, if you guys remember from the other scan that I had done maybe last week. Basically something like this where it kind of reps up and then ends up closing flat on that day. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, and that's what I would potentially trade. So basically morning move, and maybe it goes up 20, 30, 40 cents, probably not 40, but ideally 20, 30 cents, and then it ends up coming all the way back would be ideal. NTNX, nice unwinder. I was there a little bit towards the close, but I missed most of the move. What I think is good to kind of look at here, again, my goal on these Sunday night scans is not just to tell you what I'm going to buy or sell, but kind of give you an idea of what I look for. So something like this, you can see it's been kind of hugging VWAP all the way down and starts to get away from it, comes back, retest, fails, retest, fails, retest, fails, and then you look at where the support was, and you can kind of see it was around 2050s. You've got that basketball analogy that we go over on Tandem Trader and textbook trading, and then we get that nice little unwind. So it kind of unravels all these dip buyers that we're kind of buying based off the 2050 support, and then those all unravel down to the 19s. So morning move ideally comes into the 2020, 2040s, and then potentially more pressure from there. SGMS, this one was pretty difficult on Friday. The idea was right, but just the whole trying to hold it through these dips was extremely difficult. I got long over on the dips, and I had about a 1970s average, and you think you're doing okay over here as it's pushing through 20s, and then it pulls back, and you're like, all right, it held higher low, good. Starts to break out, almost gets there, all of a sudden you're almost back to flat, right? And then it starts to go, and it goes red to green, and then it comes back. So it was very, very difficult. My thought is that potentially Greenlight came in that one, and CC, there was quite a bit of buying throughout the day, some blocks and stuff like that. So they had announced that they had a position, I think it was last week. So it's possible days like that, they are in the market on times. Sometimes when that kind of stuff happens, especially after earnings report, there's liquidity, there's a time to be able to position. But with a candle like this, I mean, this is the type that if it does hold, we could potentially blow through that prior resistance, get up towards 22, 23. And if not, and if it was just an intraday squeeze and this kind of caught people off guard, then I'd be looking to fade it back towards the mid-19s. Last but not least, and again, I try not to overload scan. I put pins on, but this one, pretty good read, pretty good unwind, but it was a great example of, if you're trading off the open and it flushes out a buck, you need to have your wish orders open, and you need to get familiar with what support looks like, and take notes along the day. You can see this action right here before it headed higher, and you see it again right here. This flush out was supported, and this flush out was supported, and from that point forward it never saw lower. So those are the kind of things that you need to kind of take mental notes on. And the same thing as far as going lower, where you end up having it shoves out, comes back, retest, fails, and then it starts to fade off. Especially if you're trading size, but especially if you're trading contrary to the way in which it's going. So if you're shorting into rips and you start to notice that every time it flushes out, it starts to base at the same level, you should be taking those notes. You should be seeing that and actually understanding it, rather than trying to trade what you want to happen. Because too many times if you're like, well, I think it should pull back, and you ignore this action, you're going to end up getting bent into 30, 35, 36 bucks a share. So that one, typically, it had some pretty good support. It did kind of consolidate pretty well. So I'd like to see it open relatively flat, and I could see it going back up towards the highs. If it gaps up and it rushes towards 34.20s, I'd be looking to kind of fade it versus the 50s. So we'll see what happens. But again, what I was getting at before a little bit was I'm not overloading scan. Like I said, we've got a lot of earnings stuff. So but the biggest challenge right now is just kind of watching a few names, because there's so much stuff moving. And if you go back and look back throughout the day, you probably will notice that had you just focused on 2 or 3 names, you might have done a little bit better. So keep that in mind when you're trying to make decisions in the morning. One other thing that I kind of I'd rather not get involved pre-market right now, unless there's some really good trend. There's no point if a stock is up 2 or 3 points to really start to get a feel for which way you think it's going to go, because you never know, right? Pins was up quite a bit pre-market. You can see over here it was up $5 a share, and then it looked like it was putting in a top, and you can see 33 is pretty much the top here. That's the other thing to take note on, right? Is you look left to kind of get a feel for where the resistance should be. If it starts to base at that prior resistance, that should be another key not to get in front of it, not to stay short. So keep that in mind as well. But for the most part, try to keep those names slimmed down. Try to focus on just 2 or 3 main names. Let the trades come to you, and let's see what this week brings. We're still going to have another wild week of some probably intense range, just because a lot of these things are priced to perfection, including TWOU, and one minor misstep and you're going to get absolutely crushed. Same thing with PS. If these things are priced to perfection, this thing took a nearly 50% haircut. So be cautious. Just because something's pulled back 40% does not mean it can't go down 60%. Just because it's down a lot does not mean it needs to rebound. And so just stay safe out there, and that's about it. Hopefully, we'll see you in Vegas. If you have any questions about Traders for Cause, reach out. If you have any questions about the room, do not hesitate to leave a comment and ask. Have a great night, guys.